in Portland, Oregon was walking around when he noticed this flyer. He ignored it at first, but as he kept walking, he noticed more and more throughout the city. The eerie, vaguely familiar feeling and the sheer abundance of the flyers piqued his curiosity, and he decided to give the number a call.
Thank you for calling the Willamette Valley Dream Survey. Please leave a detailed account of your dream after the tone. Transcripts or audio from your report may be duplicated in other media.
You may be wondering what happens if you actually give them your dream, and unsurprisingly, the answer is nothing at all. No follow-up texts or phone calls, and no other information. And the case starts to take an even stranger turn when very similar flyers were found in Utah, this time labeled as the Happy Valley Dream Survey. People who called the number listed on this flyer allegedly received phone calls in the middle of the night. The calls would only ring for a couple of seconds, never leaving enough time for the recipient of the call to answer. And of course, when they would call back, there was nothing. Some claim the Happy Valley Dream Survey has links to a cult, although a definite answer to who is behind these strange surveys is still ultimately unknown.
This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 p.m. and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.
In 1981, a 13-year-old girl vanished and no one even knew that she was missing for over a decade. This is truly going to be one of the most bizarre true crime cases you're ever going to hear. So if you need to put your phone down and clean your room or something, we might be here a while. Mary Day was her parents' oldest daughter. She had 2 younger sisters named Kathy and Sherry. And all 3 girls were in and out of foster care for most of their childhoods due to their mother's neglect. While all the girls were in foster care, their mother ended up divorcing their father and marrying their stepfather, a military man named William Hoole, and then they had 2 more children. She did end up regaining custody of Mary and Kathy, but their youngest sister, Sherry, was adopted by her foster parents. She would end up being the lucky one. The whole family then moved to Hawaii because that's where the stepfather was being stationed, and this man sucked. He was super physically abusive to his stepdaughters, Mary and Kathy. Sadly, around this time, their biological father also passed away in a really tragic accident. he left them behind an inheritance that they would get when they were older, and Mary and Kathy used to fantasize about using that money to run away. Sadly, around this time, Mary was removed from the household once again and placed in foster care because of her stepfather's abuse. And while Mary was in the foster system, her entire family got up and moved again to California, leaving a 13-year-old Mary in Hawaii with strangers. After a few months, Mary was sent to California to be reunited with her mother and the rest of her family, but from there, 13-year-old Mary Day vanished. There was zero record of Mary ever being in California. She never attended school in California. The foster system never followed back up to see if she was okay living back with her mom and stepdad. People that knew her family well in California thought that the family only had 3 kids. No one in California ever remembered seeing Mary, and her family never reported her missing. This 13-year-old girl left Hawaii and pretty much vanished into thin air, and no one even knew that she was missing for over a decade. Do you guys still remember Sherry, the sister that was adopted by her foster parents? Well, when Sherry got older, she wanted to be reunited with her biological mom and sisters. Well, when she asked her biological mother, "Where is my oldest sister, Mary?" she was told that Mary ran away in 1981 and to never bring up her name again. Nearly every single photo of Mary had been destroyed. It was like she never existed. Well, Sherry was not taking no for an answer. She was super determined to find out what happened to her older sister. She tried to report Mary missing, but at this point it had been 11 years since anyone had seen her, and honestly, Sherry was kind of disregarded, so she started doing her own investigation. And after doing a little bit more digging, Sherry was pretty much 100% convinced that her biological mom and stepfather had unalived her sister, Mary. She kept pushing for an official investigation to be started, and one was officially started on the disappearance of Mary in 2002. 21 years after the child disappeared. The sister, Kathy, that was there the day that Mary disappeared, said that that night they were left home alone while the rest of the family went out to dinner. And when they all got back, her stepfather, remember that like abusive a-hole? Well, his dog wasn't feeling good. It was sick. And he blamed it on Mary and started to beat her. Kathy says that the last time she saw her sister Mary, she was being hit by her stepfather and blood was pouring out of her mouth. And the next morning, when she woke up, she was told that Mary ran away and to never speak her name again. Kathy also told the investigators that there was a part of their backyard that they were told to never go near after Mary disappeared. The investigators bring cadaver dogs to that backyard thinking that they might be able to find Mary's body. And the cadaver dogs did get a hit on that corner of the backyard. So they started digging it up and they did not find Mary's body. But what they did find was a child's sneaker, like the kind that Mary used to wear. The dog's handlers said that they believed a body had been there, but it had been removed. So the investigators decide to question Mary's mom and stepfather, and they both stuck to the same story, that Mary had run away when she was 13 years old in 1981. But they're not sure why a police report wasn't found, because they started saying they 100% did report Mary missing after she ran away. The investigators did not believe that for a second, because turns out Mary's mom and stepfather had been cashing in her Social Security benefits from her biological dad's passing the entire time she was missing, which is fraud and very illegal. The investigators on this case were now convinced that this poor girl was killed by her mom and stepdad and no one was looking for her for over a decade. And at the exact same time they start really building a case against Mary's mom and stepdad, the unthinkable happened. Mary Day came home. I know, I'm just as shocked as you are. 22 years after Mary Day vanished, a 35-year-old woman in Arizona was pulled over and told them that her name was Mary Day. She also had an ID with Mary Day's name on it and Mary Day's date of birth. That ID had only been issued 3 weeks prior. Could you imagine the shock on that traffic officer's face when he ran her ID and said, "Hey girl, you're missing"? She told him, "Hey, I am Mary Day. I ran away when I was 13 years old to escape abuse from my mom and stepdad." Obviously, the investigators that are currently doing a homicide case for a person that's apparently alive and well in Arizona wanted to speak with this woman. This woman had a thick Southern accent that Mary never had. They found it suspicious that she waited until she was 35 years old to get an ID with her name on it. Was it just a coincidence that Mary Day resurfaced at the same time that a homicide investigation was being built against her parents? Was it possible that this woman was an imposter hired by her parents? The investigators were convinced that this woman was hired by Mary Day's parents to impersonate Mary Day, so they started to refer to her as Phoenix Mary. But then the DNA test came back. Phoenix Mary was a match to Mary Day's mother and father. Sherry and Kathy are so excited that their sister Mary has come home. They start hanging out with Mary all the time, but they couldn't shake this feeling that maybe something wasn't right. This Mary wasn't the same Mary that they remembered. This Mary was an alcoholic and aggressive. She couldn't remember important details from their childhood, so they started to think, maybe this isn't our sister at all. And the investigators were having their own doubts too and started to theorize that maybe Mary's parents had a daughter before Mary that they put up for adoption. And this woman, Phoenix Mary, was that baby hired to impersonate Mary Day. Sadly, because of all the doubts regarding her identity, Phoenix Mary was outcasted by the family that she was just reunited with. It wasn't until Phoenix Mary was dying from cancer and on her deathbed that her sister came to speak with her again with the chief of the police department present, because they were trying to get a deathbed confession from Phoenix Mary that she wasn't Mary Day. But she stuck to her story. And tragically, in 2017, Mary passed away from cancer completely alone. In my opinion, I believe that Phoenix Mary was Mary Day. I mean, DNA doesn't lie. And I believe that the gaps in her memory could easily be explained by just trauma and probably the alcoholism. I think it's terribly sad that this poor girl had parents that didn't even care enough to look for her when she went missing. And then when she finally did come home, no one believed her. She was forced to try and prove who she was, literally until the day she died.
72 years ago, this 10-year-old girl would disappear from summer camp and she has never been seen since. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the disappearance of Constance Smith. Constance Christine Smith, nicknamed Connie, was born on the 11th of July 1942 in Wyoming. She was born into a very affluent, wealthy, powerful family because her granddad was actually the governor of the state of Wyoming. Connie grew up on a ranch and developed a love for animals, especially horses. She also loved to read adventure books, colour in, and go on her travels with her family. She would mainly spend most of her time surrounded by adults, so Connie was very mature for her age and very well spoken. In the summer of 1952, Connie and her mum Helen took a trip to Connecticut to visit Helen's parents. Helen was in the middle of a pretty messy divorce from Connie's dad, so maybe she just needed to get away, clear her head, and have a little bit of space. While in Connecticut, Helen would enroll Connie into the Camp Sloan summer camp, where Connie could go to have some fun, make some memories, make some friends, and not spend all summer bored with her mum and her grandparents. Going to this summer camp was something that Connie was so excited for. She was absolutely buzzing. She celebrated her 10th birthday while at the summer camp, and when Helen went to visit her, she expressed to her mum that she didn't want to leave. She was having such an amazing relaxing time. She was having so much fun, and so Connie pleaded with her mum, asking if she could stay longer because she was due to only have about another week or so left at the camp, but Helen said no, she could not extend her stay. A couple of days later, Connie would be at the centre of a horrible beating from some of her other campmates. It's not 100% confirmed why this altercation happened, however, it's believed that Connie was being bullied by these other kids. These kids were bullying Connie for the way that she spoke. They said that she was too posh to be at their summer camp, and they were essentially trying to chase her out by bullying her. As a result of this beating, Connie would sustain a burst bloody nose and have her glasses broken. On the morning of the 16th of July, Connie told the campmates that she was sharing a tent with that she wasn't going to be going to the canteen for breakfast that morning. She had apparently fell out of bed and either hurt her lip or her hip, and she had borrowed an ice pack from the infirmary to treat this, and she wanted to go and return the ice pack. After watching her campmates walk out of the tent to go for their breakfast at around about 8 AM, Connie would pull on a red windbreaker and walked out of Camp Sloan with nothing but the clothes on her back and a couple of photographs of her friends in her pocket. Connie left behind all of her spare clothes, all of her possessions, even money. Connie would make her way down Indian Mountain Road, which is a stretch of road that is densely populated with big trees, thick brush and fields. A caretaker, a man who actually worked at the camp, would see 10-year-old Connie on the side of the road, but he didn't pull over to ask what she was doing or where she was going. He would later say that he did this because he didn't think that Connie was one of the children at the camp. He thought that she was one of the camp counsellors. People mistaking Connie for someone much older is a common theme throughout this case. Despite being only 10-year-old, Connie was 5 foot tall. She was described as well developed. She apparently had an older looking face, and the way that she spoke, again, she's very well spoken, made her appear older than she actually was. Other witnesses who would later come forward remembering seeing Connie on the side of the road trying to hitchhike would recall that she picked daisies as she walked. One of the final sightings of Connie would be by a married couple. Connie knocked on the couple's door and asked them for directions to Lakeville, which was a nearby town, but it wasn't the town where her grandparents lived or where her mum was staying, so we don't know why she wanted to make her way to Lakeville. The married couple gave Connie the directions that she asked for, and they remembered that it was very clear that Connie was upset and had been crying, with tears still brimming in her eyes, yet they still let her walk away, a young girl who was very clearly lost and upset, and they just let her walk off. After this, there has never been another confirmed sighting or trace of 10-year-old Constance Smith. It took Camp Sloan 3 hours to report Connie missing, and when they did, the authorities started an extensive search for her. As you can imagine, Connie came from a very powerful family, and so the authorities gave 120%, but to no avail. They were never able to find her. 9 months after Connie's disappearance, a man named Frederick Pope would confess to police in Ohio that he knew what happened to Connie, he knew who killed her, and he knew where she was. He claimed that himself and 2 accomplices, a man named Jack Walker and a woman named Wilma Sims, picked up Connie as she was hitchhiking on the side of the road. He would give over details that I don't know if they were public knowledge or not. He told the police that he had promised Connie he was going to take her back home to her Wyoming ranch. I'm not really sure what to make of that, because again, I don't know if because her family was so powerful and well known that people knew they lived on a ranch in Wyoming or not, because if this wasn't, then it must have been Connie that told him. He would go on to claim that Jack killed Connie, and out of anger that he had done this, Frederick went on to kill Jack, beating him with an iron pole. Frederick told the police that they would find Connie's body near a specific canyon in Arizona. However, despite how promising this lead seemed, it fell apart just as quickly as it came together. There was no record of a Jack Walker or Wilma Sims ever existing, and much more. When Ohio police presented these findings to Frederick, he would admit that he had fabricated the entire story. It was all a lie, and he was likely trying to claim some reward money. But on Halloween in 1985, now 6 years after Connie's disappearance, police in Arizona would find the skeletal remains of a young girl nearby the area that Frederick said they had left Connie. The skeleton was found lay face down, and it was confirmed to have belonged to a young girl believed to have been aged between 11 and 17. Again, Connie was 10. The skeleton was given the name Little Miss X, and it was determined that Little Miss X had died between 9 to 18 months before her skeleton was found. So if this was Connie, someone had kidnapped her and held her captive for years before eventually killing her, or before she eventually died. Little Miss X's teeth and Connie's dental records were compared, and from this they found that Little Miss X and Connie were not the same girl. As far as I could see, Little Miss X is still unidentified. In 1980, a man named William Henry Redmond, a travelling fairground worker, became a suspect in Connie's case. In 1951, William would lure an 8-year-old girl named June into his car and proceeded to strangle her to death. This was only 1 year before Connie disappeared, and if Connie was hitchhiking on the side of the road like some witnesses believe she was, it could have been possible that William could have picked her up and then killed her as well. While behind bars, William would gloat to some of the other prisoners that he had actually murdered 4 young girls, not just the one, not just June. When he was questioned about Connie, he completely denied any involvement whatsoever. He agreed to take a polygraph, a lie detector test, and he passed with flying colours. The pass of this polygraph test, along with police not being able to determine with certainty that William was in the area of Sloan when Connie disappeared, they weren't able to proceed investigating him as a suspect. He would die a good couple of years later and never admitted if he was involved with Connie's disappearance. As of today, there has been no sighting, sign or trace of Constance Smith, and we have no idea what happened to her. Was she kidnapped off the side of the road and met with foul play? Did she get lost in the woods? Sadly, we may never know.